Good evening. My name's Garland Nixon. It's Saturday night, and I am here to chat just a little bit. Not going to stay on too long. I want to say hello to everybody on YouTube and on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, make sure you go to YouTube, subscribe to my channel, and make sure you click the little bell so you'll get notifications. Make sure you share on all of your platforms. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm doing StreamYard now. It seems to be great. This is what I'm going to use for my future broadcast that allows me to stream on multiple platforms at the same time. So this is going to be fun. All right, so here's where we're starting. We got a new president, and I want to chat about that. I'm gonna talk for a few seconds about why you should check out my channel, Garland Nixon, why you should follow me on Twitter, why you should subscribe to my channel on YouTube, etc. For this reason, and this is important. Most people now just do confirmation bias. If they're a member of the Democratic Party, or as I call it, the blue brainwashed cult, but the Democratic Party, they go to MSNBC, they go to CNN, right? If they're a member of the red cult, as I call it, or the Republican Party, they go to Fox, OANN, blah, blah, blah. But either way, the problem is all you're going to get is confirmation bias. All you're going to get is people to tell you things that you already believe, to repeat mantras that would make sense to you. And in the end, you end up saying things and repeating things that you don't even know. People end up saying things like, you're like, hey, we should leave Syria. And people say things like, well, we've got to stay there to protect the Kurds. And then you'll say, can you tell me a little bit about the Kurds? And they don't even know who the Kurds are. I've taken from a radio talk show host who has had that personally happen to him. I have had callers on multiple occasions, because when people call my radio show, this is important for you to think about. When people call my radio show, right, and say things to me and challenge me, which is good. I want to be challenged. If I'm wrong, I want to be found out, and I want somebody to put me right. I'm not trying to be there to be some kind of a demagogue trying to tell people the truth. I'm trying to learn the truth the same as my listeners, right? We're all working together. So when somebody calls and says something to me, quite naturally, I'm going to ask them further, right? But the problem is when we only watch the channels and read the newspapers that agree with that basically show what we already believe, just reinforce what we already believe, we end up saying things and not knowing what we're talking about. Let me give you two examples, right? For those of you who listen to my show every Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Eastern Time on WPFW 89.3 FM, I'm going to talk about that. When my other show on Radio Sputnik, I don't take, it's pre-recorded, so we don't take calls. This one on WPFW, I take calls. So let me give you a couple of examples so you'll know what I'm saying. One fairly recently, right? The President Trump said he was going to remove troops from Syria and Afghanistan a couple of years ago, right? And which we know the intelligence community, the Pentagon, the war monsters, the empire, right? They don't like that. And they're going to come up with some reason not for Trump not to do it. But forget Trump, whoever the president is, right? Because I'm a person who doesn't believe in war or empire, so I don't care who the president is. When they say, hey, we're going to bring the troops home from I don't care where, could be Canada, Garland's going to always say, yeah, good idea, do that, right? The problem is we had people who have been indoctrinated, that's the word I'll use. They've been indoctrinated to a cultish belief of anti-Trumpism. So they viewed everything in their life through anti-Trumpism. The problem with that is they began to identify themselves, to identify their positions based on anti-Trumpism. What does that mean? Here's what it means. Back in the Obama days, people like me used to laugh because the Tea Party people hated Obama so bad that we used to joke. And we'd say, boy, if Obama said, I like drinking water, we should all drink water, the Tea Party people would die of thirst because they'd give up water. They were identifying themselves through anti-Obamaism, through the lens of whatever Obama's for, I'm against. So they were easily manipulated. If you know what somebody will do, that straightforwardly, you can easily manipulate them. So the resistance people today, or a lot of people, were educated to see the world through the lens of anti-Trumpism. And I'm getting somewhere with this. Remember what I'm saying. I'm saying it's important that you don't only watch the news show programs that you traditionally watch and that agree with you, and read the newspapers that agree with you. I don't care where you're on the spectrum. You need to get another view. If you don't see see the world through some other lens other than your own, you can't possibly understand yours. Okay, so let me give you my two examples, and then we'll get on and we'll talk about the Biden administration and the new stuff here, right? All right. My two examples. One of them was the Kurds. So Trump says, I'm taking the troops home, bringing the troops home from Afghanistan, Iraq, right? Okay. And Garland's like, let's do it. I'm all for that. You know, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm a lefty, but you know, ideologically, I'm not aligned with Trump. But anybody that says they're going to take the troops home, good, great. I'm going to say yeah. Well, what happened? Well, of course, the intelligence community, the Pentagon doesn't want that. They didn't really have a reason. There was no legitimate reason to say keep the troops in Syria, for example, because right now the U.S. is violating international law by having our troops in Syria. We are in Syria. We are we are controlling the oil and stealing the oil from Syria. That's what our troops are doing. It's an international war crime, right? That's what we're doing. So we shouldn't be there anyway. But at any rate, so you start seeing on the mainstream media everywhere, we've got to stay to protect the Kurds, right? We got to protect the Kurds everywhere. Protect CNN, protect the Kurds. MSNBC, protect the Kurds. Fox News. Well, you know, we got to protect the Kurds. That's a hint. When you see it on all platforms, you're being had. Right. So at this point, I'm like, it's because I know the history of the Kurds, because there's a guy named Kani Julan. He runs an organization called Kurdistan.org, website, good place to go. I've interviewed him dozens of times. So I understand the history of the Kurds, who the Kurds are, a lot of the Kurds. And I understood that enough to know that that was a bunch of crap, that it was pure. It was malarkey, as Joe Biden would say. Right. So what happened? So all over the news, protect the Kurds, protect the Kurds, protect the Kurds everywhere, right? So my radio show comes on Friday and I'm taking callers and I'm like, we need to get out. So a caller calls in. Well, we got to stay, Garland. And I'm like, oh, you tell me why. To protect the Kurds. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I already know. I'm thinking to myself, the likelihood is that this person is saying we got to stay in Syria to protect the Kurds because they heard it on TV and they don't know that much about the Kurds. But I aim to find out, and I'm going to give them a chance. Maybe they know something I don't know. So the caller's like, we got to stay in Syria to protect the Kurds. And I say, you know, I've been hearing that all over the news. And I just thought it was, to be honest with you, intelligence propaganda. But maybe it isn't. My dear friend, you tell me, why do we have to stay to protect the Kurds? Who are these Kurds? Tell me a bit about the Kurds, the history of who's going to attack the Kurds. Who are we protecting them from? The caller had no idea. I had someone call me in Washington, D.C. on a 50,000 watt FM radio station to tell me and everybody listening that we had to stay in Syria to protect the Kurds. And they had no idea who the Kurds were or who we would even be protecting them from. In other words, they were repeating what they heard on television, but they didn't even have a superficial grasp of the issues involved. That's why I say that people must listen to alternative news sites, alternative websites. Sometimes the ones that disagree with you. There's one that I think is just pure poppycock. It's called the Gateway Pundit, Breitbart. These far right ones. I think they're nuts, but I go there. And I read what's on there. Why? Because I want to know what these people think. I want to know what conservatives think. I want to know what the far right thinks. Where are they coming from? How can I understand my position if I don't understand theirs? And I don't want to end up saying to someone, you know, we got to stay in Syria to protect the Kurds. And they say to me, so tell me, Garland, who are these Kurds? And I'm like, the Kurds? Who are the Kurds? The Kurds. Go, you know the thing, right? I don't want to end up with, you know the thing. I don't want to end up being there. The other thing I'll give you is just one more. If you know anything about Russiagate in my history, people like me and Jimmy Dore and a whole bunch of other people were like, this is a bunch of crap. This is laughable. Please do not be taken by this hoax, right? So at one point, you probably remember the infamous Trump Tower meeting. And I'm like, people are like, oh, that shows collusion. I'm like, well, this is absurd. There is no collusion. But if there were, that wouldn't show it. And people are like, oh, no. Oh, yeah, that shows collusion. There was the Russian lawyer. And I'm like, well, her name is Natalia Veselnitskaya, and I actually interviewed her with my own interpreter. She speaks a little bit of English. So I've interpreted the Russian, I have interviewed the Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya from Russia. She was in Russia. I had an interpreter. I questioned her. She answered all my questions. I still have the audio of it, actually. But at any rate, so I know a lot about the Trump Tower meter. I know who meeting. I know who was there. I know it was about blah, 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 right? Okay. So I get people. So I'm like, it has nothing to do. It does not show any collusion. It's absurd. So of course, I get a caller. Garland, Trump Tower meeting. I think you're wrong. I'm like, okay, sure, go ahead. It shows collusion. I'm telling you, that Trump Tower meeting shows collusion. And my answer was, okay, fair enough. I've researched it in depth. And my research tells me that it's completely unrelated to that it's actually related to the Magnitsky Act and Bill Browder. And that's a whole nother thing. But I've studied all of that, and there's books involved, the Browder hoax, and on and on. So there's a documentary called Behind the Magnitsky Act Behind the Scenes. I've studied in depth this. I do not think that the infamous Trump Tower meeting shows collusion. I said, however, as always, I am open for further information. Brother, put me paid. Tell me right now, how does the Trump Tower meeting show collusion? And the guy said, well, I don't want to go around in circles with you. I said, I'm not asking you to go around in circles. I am listening. I'm all ears, brother. You tell me, how does it? He's like, well, it does. But he just started like moving the goalposts and shaking around and running around. And I'm like, well, you don't really know, do you? And I said, I understand. I wasn't going to press the guy and squeeze him. But here's the bottom line. It's what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is this. If you do not research things on your own, if you just trust that MSNBC, CNN, I don't care who it is, RT, France 24, CGTN, Press TV, whoever it is that I name them all, but countries that you love, countries you don't like, whatever, right? If you just trust that any of those are telling you the truth, you're probably going to be had and you're not going to know anything. You're going to get one side of it. You have to research on your own. You have to be willing to recognize that sometimes there are people that are just trying to mislead you for their own nefarious reasons. And if you do that, you'll start to get a true picture. So I'm a good person to listen to. You should subscribe to Garland Nixon on YouTube. And the reason is, I am a member of so now to me, we have two brainwash cults, the blue brainwash cult, the red brainwash cult, and both of the brainwash cults believe total absolute absurdities. And both of the brainwash cults who believe these are absurdities would argue, no. The other brainwash cults, they believe absurdities. Mine is true. Isn't that how? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how brainwash cults work. There's like nobody, like the Jim Jones Kool-Aid drinkers. They weren't like, oh no, that's poisonous Kool-Aid. He's going to kill us all. But we're going along with it. No, they really thought they were going to heaven and they had to do that to bring back Jesus or something crazy, right? They really believed it. That's the way it works. So if you're in the red brainwash cult or the blue brainwash cult, you're going to think yours is the right, intelligent, when the other one's the evil, or they're racist, or they're sexist, or there's something, whatever. But unless you look into it, you won't know. So let's move forward. That's a lot of yapping and clap trapping. But if you know me, I yap and clap trap. Okay. Let's next talk about, oh, look, I'm seeing some more people there. Oh my gosh, we got all kinds of people. Let's just talk about Joe Biden's president. So it's interesting because for the last several presidents, let me throw this dynamic out to you. My dear friends. You might not agree, but I'm going to throw this at you. 2000, what happens? The George Bush comes in, right? You've got a Republican, and he has the House. He's got the Senate. He's looking good. The Supreme Court, he's got it all, right? 8 years later, the country has gone to holy hell, and the Democrats are in. Well, what do you know? It's Barack Obama, the Democrat. And what happens now? He has the House. He has a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. He's got it made, right? 8 years later, back to the Republicans. Now Donald Trump's in office. And Donald Trump has the House, the Senate, right? Are we noticing a pattern here? 2000, the Republicans have both the houses and the Senate. 2008, the Democrats have both houses in the Senate. 2016, back to the Republicans, both houses in the Senate. Now we get hit with a pandemic. And if you look at the numbers, it's pretty clear. If no pandemic, Donald Trump wins it. Biden beat him by the skin of his teeth. During a pandemic when Trump screwed up everything, no pandemic, Trump wins, right? But let's go there. So because of the pandemic, that 8 hours is short, or that 8 years is shortened to 4. So what we get is 2000 Republicans, both houses, White House. 8 years later, Democrats, both houses, White House. 8 years later, back to the Republicans, both houses, White House. 4 years later, back to the Democrats, back house. You notice the pattern? Why is that? Well, think about this. Don't think of it from I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. Let's look at this thing in a broad sense at what's happening politically, right? Every 8 years, and with a pandemic, this shortened to 4, the American public completely dispatches one of the parties and goes completely with the other party. That party screws everything for 8 years up, and they go back to the other party. That one gives them the same thing. They get screwed, blued, and tattooed, and they go back. And this is what we have, a game of ping pong, back and forth the net. Why? Because the American people are looking for a party to bail them out. They're looking for a person. They're looking for a Bernie Sanders or a Donald Trump or a Hillary Clinton or a Joe Biden to bail them out. What if the problem is not a person? Let me tell you what, the example of that. I used to have people say to me all the time, we got to get all the Congress members out. The Congress members have to go. We have to have a whole new Congress, all new people, to which I say, aren't we going to have the same dynamics? Aren't we going to have the same rules? Aren't we going to have the same amount of money pouring in? Aren't we going to have the same amount of lobbyists? You're going to put new people in there. If the problem was the people, we'd already be okay, because people are only staying but so long, and sooner or later they die and new people come in. It switches over, doesn't it? We have different presidents. Shouldn't it change? If the problem is the people, changing the people out, putting in new people, and we'll be fine, because it was nothing but a people problem. There was no problem with the system. So what are we finding out? Look what's happening right now during a pandemic. The system that we live in isn't working. Our healthcare system is not doing the job. It's unable to do the job. Our healthcare system is bursting at the seams. It can't handle the number of people. Richest country in the history of the world, and our healthcare system cannot handle this pandemic. And we are not putting more money into it to make it handle it. We're sitting there looking like idiots. We have been completely, this system has been, economically, the American system has been physically unable to handle the pandemic, economically unable to handle it, and socially, look at what's happening. Over the summer, the left, more left-leaning people, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, all that stuff, right? They were in the streets, and the right was like, oh, we've got to stop them, crack down on those protesters, right? That was the right wing, crack down on those protesters. They're seditioners, lock them up. And I was like, oh, right-wingers, you better be wary, because they'll come for you next. But I didn't have to say that, because it was going to happen sooner or later. So at some point, the right-wingers freak out, and they're protesting. And now they're like, yeah, we're going to use those sedition laws that we got for the Black Lives Matter protest. Yeah, we're using it on you now. And I'm like, hey, I told you, thought you were going to be slick. Yeah, they're going to take the Black Lives Matter protest away. Your protest against the government, you were next. You're out of here. Okay, so our government is economically unstable, socially unstable, militarily unstable. We are aggressively confronting countries that are nuclear armed that could annihilate all human beings. That is irresponsible what our government did under Donald Trump with the Chinese people, and under the Biden people with China and Russia. These are nuclear armed nations. We are, as they would say in an old Bugs Bunny cartoon, we're lighting matches in the powder magazine. Gunpowder all the way around us, and we're striking matches, throwing them around. Don't pick fights with people who have as many nukes as you do. What a stupid species we are. A stupid species we are. It just stupid. In fact, I'll say this. Since I'm moving to the Biden presidency anyway. To me, when I talk about stupid, we're stupid species. To me, right now, the wealthiest, now, when I say the wealthiest country in the history of the world, the wealthiest in that it's a very small group of us are wealthy. The rest of us aren't, right? But when I say that, what I'm looking at is, and I started reading, that was stupid. I started reading the comments, and trust me, if you're ever doing a live stream, don't read the comments, because you'll be talking and you'll be like, and then you won't remember a damn thing you were talking about. So whatever I was talking about is gone. I started to read the comments, but I'll get back to it. We're talking about the Biden presidency, and I'll get back to it when I recall. Okay. So, this is what I'm getting at. In my opinion, We have the most dangerous two political parties. And again, I don't think they're political parties anymore. I think they're brainwashed cults that just believe they're given a boogeyman. The CIA, the government tells them hate China, hate Russia, hate Iran, hate Venezuela, whatever, and they believe it. They need whatever they're told to do. They're like puppets, right? So we got two parties. We got one of them that refuses to accept the reality, the scientific reality that that climate change is real. So in the long run, that it needs to be addressed. It ain't going to be addressed if the Republican Party, if the red cult has anything to do with it, which takes us to an early demise, or I guess maybe even an appropriate demise, one could argue, if that's our time to go as a species. However, not to be outdone, we've got the blue cult. So climate change in the long run will take us out. The blue cult can't wait. They want to, as I say, light matches in the powder magazine. The Democratic Party is so stupid, so dangerous, that they're picking a fight with Russia and China. First of all, the United States and Russia have 95% of all nuclear weapons on the earth. That ain't the guy to pick a fight with, and China. And here's what's so stupid about it. China and Russia doesn't even want to fight. China and Russia doesn't want to fight the U.S. China and Russia are looking at the U.S. saying, you guys got a big military. It's going to be a problem. We could end up in nuclear, this thing. I mean, think about it. Could it end up nuclear? You've got this big military and you could hit these people hard. And what if they think they're losing? What do you think they're going to do? Okay, the U.S. goes to war against Russia and is winning. You're closing in on Moscow. Putin and his people are in the bunker and Moscow is encircled. What the hell do you think they're going to do? What would the U.S. president do if Russia and China invaded and had the capital circled and were about to take over? You don't think they'd push the damn button? You best sure they would, and wipe out all humankind. And that is what our absurd, suicidal Democratic Party and leadership is looking at. The Trump people were so stupid. Now, they didn't pick on Russia, but they were so stupid they picked on China, another nuclear power. Pompeo and these guys, absolute lunatics, right? Now we got the Democratic Party in, and rest assured, they are going to put in danger every human being who exists. You, your children, your wives, your husbands, I hope you don't have all of those things, but you get the picture, right? Everybody's going to be in danger. And these people, these are the adults in the room. And they're going to tell us these are the adults in the room. So they'll come back and they'll have the right gender pronoun, he, she, her, them. They'll use that kind of stuff. They'll have a Black Lives Matter logo mask on. They'll have a rainbow flag. They'll do all that kind of stuff. Beside their name, it'll say he, she, her, him, them, crap like that. They'll do all that stuff. As the empire drags us towards an early demise. That's what worries me. I mean, look at the Biden. We got a new presidency, right? We got a new White House. So what happens usually? The people who won have a euphoria. Oh, hooray, especially now. Oh, Trump is gone. Hooray, we're saved. It's Joe Biden. It's Joe Biden. The problem is Joe Biden is a warmonger at a very dangerous time. Here's the dangerous time. In, let's say, 1991, the Soviet Union disintegrated, right? China was still a very, very poor country. So the US was really the hyperpower. It was a unipolar world. The US was the only superpower, and you could call it the hyperpower, right? So the US built up its military even bigger and stronger and more and more and more, and kept expanding its military. Then 9/11 hit. The U.S. expands its military power even more, keeps expanding its military powers, keeps using its military power, right? The U.S. gets bigger and bigger and stronger militarily, but there was at great cost. We deindustrialized, right? The U.S. sent all of our jobs as Russia opened up, and that became some cheaper labor there in Eastern Europe. As China opened their borders and allowed us to go in and move factories there, there's cheaper labor there. So the capitalists, right? The oligarchs, the really super wealthy people realized we've got new labor markets up. We're going to close our factories in the U.S. and we're going to move to the new labor markets where we can very, very cheaply build things and sell them back to the Americans or whoever. So that's what the oligarchs did. They closed their stuff down and over they go to sell their stuff overseas. To build their stuff overseas. And it was very, very costly for the United States. And we started a very, very fast economic spiral down. But what happened? Here's the way it went down. First, they closed their factories here. They opened in other countries, much cheaper labor. Now they got all of this profit, huge profits. They've never made profits like this because their labors are so cheap. So what do they do with these profits? They put them back into the market. They buy their own stock. Why? To pump the market up, because they're making money off the market. So they make these huge profits. Keep in mind, those were the profits that in the past would have went to American workers. A portion of those profits would have went to American workers. Now they all go in the pockets of the oligarchs. They pump it back into the stock market. The stock market blows up, a giant balloon. It's blowing up with the profits that they're putting back. And we have what's called financialization, right? So we go from an industrial economy where we make things, and an industrial economy is prosperous. Prosperity. Large groups of people can make a decent salary. We go from an industrial one to a financialized capital. What does that mean? Now, how is money made? Money's made because a big bank sells 10,000 mortgages, and it slices those mortgages up, and it calls them securities, and it calls them and it gives them different kinds of names. And it takes these mortgages that it sold up, but billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of mortgages, and it resells these slices of these mortgages. And it resells slices of those mortgages. And it keeps slicing this thing up till you don't even know what the hell it is anymore. They're complex financial tools. So now they're making money. But the problem with these things are, what are they making money? Off of interest, off of debt. So they're extracting money because they make money off of debt. They're extracting money out of the out of the economy, right? So now we had an industrial economy where a company makes money, it builds more factories, it hires more people, it expands its products, money goes back in to the economy, and everybody makes more money. To a financial economy where the industry leaves the wealthier nations and builds the stuff in the cheap, in the least expensive area, makes a greater profit, but it doesn't return that profit to the U.S. or to Northern England or any of these other places that got deindustrialized. Pumps it into the stock market, sells carves up and creates these financial tools, and so now they're making money by making money. They're lending money. They're getting all of these things together, and then they're selling parts of the money they lended, and that's financialization. They're making all the money off of debt, off of slicing and carving debt and selling more and more, and then it goes down the rabbit hole. And we end up here. And then somebody like Donald Trump says, I'm going to bring back good paying jobs, and he can't. And Joe Biden says, I'm going to bring back good paying jobs, and he can't. Good paying jobs are in an industrial economy. When people think of good paying jobs, they think of the steel mills being open. They think of places where people could go make a living being open, right? That's an industrialized economy. Before we had an agrarian, right? An agrarian economy, agriculture, people grow things and they sell it, right? Industrial economy, the Industrial Revolution. People make things and they sell them, and money goes back into making things. Now we're in financialization, a financial economy. The people who made all of that money, taking their jobs to the cheaper countries for cheap labor, now take that money, put it back into the market, roll it over in complex financial tools, and they get rich playing with money. But when they do that, there's nothing in it for the average worker. So we end up with what we have now. And then we get hit with COVID, and COVID exposes all of this stuff, right? Well, look at that. Coop W, Pat Hacker, all of my friends. So what happens? COVID didn't change anything. As difficult times don't change you, they expose you. So now Biden's in, and the blue cult is cheering, oh, we're saved. And the red cult, of course, is down in the mouth. Oh, we're screwed this time. You were already screwed. You were screwed with Trump, screwed with Clinton, screwed with Obama, because it is a bad system. It is a system that is designed. People are like, the system doesn't work. It works perfectly. Our system, through the changes of tax law, they change tax law after tax law after tax law so that the wealthy people don't make money. And the tax law was bent towards financialization. Why? Think about this for a second. In an economy where people make money building things. You tax the things that are being sold, you tax their paychecks, you tax the money they're making, right? In a financialized economy rather than an industrialized economy where people make money by buying stocks and rolling them over and buying pieces of this bond and that bond and rolling all that stuff over, how would you keep the economy going? By taxing those things. But what do? We stop taxing that stuff. We change the laws so we don't tax income that is made from a financialized manner, right? So now your economy can't really take care of itself. We can print money, but that's going to get, at some point, you ain't going to be able to do that. That's a whole nother thing with the petrodollar and how money dissipates into the world economy because the U.S. is a reserve currency. That's a whole nother long section. But my point being, that all this crap about somebody's going to fix this thing, they're going to bring back the jobs. Oh, I'm going to take you back. You know, it's like Biden's blue MAGA. I'm going to take you back to a time when America was wonderful. Everybody had a job. That's the same thing Trump says. That's all they got for us anymore. That's the only rhetoric they have. Things are so bad in the current that the only thing that a politician can say now is, I'm going to take you back. Remember when this and that? And people are like, well, I wasn't born that. Well, take my word for it. It was wonderful then. We're going back. The way forward is back. You tell me how it's working. So knowing that Joe Biden's there, Joe Biden, first of all, he would have it made if he weren't Joe Biden. Why? Because Trump has botched things so bad. I mean, his plan for COVID was, hey, let's see what happens. That ain't a good plan. And that it was like, hey, tell you what, by Easter, we'll all be in church just to dance and celebrate and come Easter. You wait. That was Trump's plan, to tell you things were going to be okay. It wasn't a good plan. It wasn't even a plan. It was the opposite of a plan. Doing nothing ain't a plan. So at any rate, and then with the economy, in a time when the rest of the world, Japan's giving you like 90% of your salary. The rest of these countries are giving you 80, 70% of your salary, right? They're actually literally giving you money to live off. The US gives you $1,200 for an entire year. $1,200 for an entire year. It's so what I'm saying is this: that ain't an accident. That is simply an indicator that this system does not work. So if you're like, I'm telling you right now, this free market, the American free market isn't even a free market. It's collapsed. It's state capitalism. It's what Vladimir Lenin called state capitalism. Why do I say that? What's going on right now? The United States government, the Federal Reserve, has announced that since all these companies can't make their money, they can't even make their loan and debt payments. These companies can't even make the interest loan payments on their debt payment, right? The U.S. has said you can sell bonds and the Federal Reserve will buy them. So the Federal Reserve is buying bonds from corporations. The corporations in the United States are now backed by the U.S. government. That's what Vladimir Lenin called state capitalism. So people are like, I hate communism. No, the government should, the government right now, the idea that we are some kind of a pure capitalist country. No, my friend, we ain't. Our government is propping up our corporations. But here's the interesting thing about it. But they won't prop you up. Again, that's our system. It's a broken system, in that it doesn't serve the masses. It's kind of like feudalism. It's a different way of doing feudalism. It's a more organized way of doing feudalism, where, you know, you got to dupe the people, but the money goes to the few, the lords and ladies, right? The nobility class, the money goes to them no matter what. And the people here, so they're propping them up. They're buying their bonds. They're giving them billions, trillions of dollars, and $1,200 a year for the average person. That's the system we're in. So when I say we got a new president, look, the Titanic hits the iceberg and ice is and water's coming in. A new captain ain't gonna fix the boat. You got a boat with a big hole in the side of it. A new captain is not going to fix the boat. And the new captain says, what are you going to do? We got to get this water out of here. What about fixing the hole? There ain't no hole. That's basically what it is. The leadership of our country, the elite ruling class, can't even admit that there's a problem, can't admit that there's a problem with our system, and they won't, because they're either benefiting off of it or their donors are benefiting off of it. So they can't even say that there's a problem. That's the bottom line. So our our system is broken. And everybody's like got a name. Well, we don't need this. We need socialism. We need communism. We need whatever isms. There's always a name. And here's what I say. We need policies that work. We don't have to put a name on them. Let's just look at what works and what we need, and let's just do it. Because here's what will happen. The billionaires and trillionaires, whatever you put forward, if you're like, well, I got an idea. Americans are starving and you guys are giving trillions of dollars to the rich. Let's give some money to the people, to the everyday worker who lost their job because the government did these lockdowns, right? Let's give money to, oh, that's socialism. We can't do that. That's communism. They're going to come up with a name to tell you can't do it. Now, the name doesn't apply when the government's giving them trillions of dollars, giving them their tax cuts, giving them their grants, and they don't even have to pay back. No, that's not socialism. But they got a name for it when they do it to you or me. And sadly, a lot of Americans are into names, and so they get lost when they hear the wrong name. Look, I want to thank everybody for coming on. I want to thank everybody for following me. I see people that, oh my God, Cheryl and Coop, all kinds of interesting names. Hug Fadu. You know my favorite handle? This is my favorite handle. There's a guy that comes on the Jimmy Dore show sometime. His handle is Tony Tone Police. How great is that? How great is Tony Tone Police? That is so cool. At any rate, so that's what I got to say. I'll end it. I'll come back later on tomorrow and we'll talk about what's going on, particularly in the Biden administration. But I just wanted to get the point across that when Biden, Trump, whoever comes in and says, we're bringing jobs back, that would indicate that we're going back to an industrial economy, which means we're going away from a financialized economy. And that ain't what we're doing. We're going even more towards a financial economy, which means there'll be less high paying jobs and that even more money goes to the billionaires. And of course, we have to tax income that's made through investments. We would have to tax that higher. We'd have to tax that in the same way that we tax earned income, but it's taxed next to nothing. And the GOP wants to completely do away with all taxes on it. So that would be just wonderful. That would be the best thing ever for the rich. They basically pay no taxes. You own a bunch of stocks and investments, and you pay zero taxes. You pay next to nothing now. So that's the way it's going. We'll probably get screwed even further. But my name's Garland Nixon. I'm just about out of here. This is StreamYard. So let's see what I'm on. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube, and I am on Twitter or Periscope or something like that, all at the same time. And I will be on here regularly. I thank everyone. And you see the crawl, right? Share and subscribe. I need 1,000. I need 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. So please, you and everyone else, go subscribe on my YouTube channel. And of course, follow me on Twitter. And I'll be back on tomorrow. And maybe we'll get a little more specific. I see that it appears to me, I don't have enough on it yet, but it appears to me that the Biden people are sending more troops into Syria. And I want to talk about that because that's one of the things I've said. Biden's a war hawk, and we are in a world of deep and serious trouble. These people are going to start some wars. These people are going to start some very dangerous confrontations with China and Russia. And I ain't even ready to deal with that because, I mean, come on, who wants to dig a hole and take iodine pills and have to run from, nuclear wasteland mutants for the rest of their lives and possibly be eaten by some? Come on, I saw that Will Smith movie, right? I Am Legend. That ain't the way I'm trying to end up my days, running around with a German Shepherd and everybody else is dead from nuclear waste. So we're going to try to talk about that. We're going to try to avoid that. Peace. I am out.